akanipiga, akanambia, nikamwambia uko kunipiga nipige, lakini usiue.
Amina kama dada yangu alikuwa ni mtu mzuri, azungumza na watu, yuwacheka na watu, hana ubaya na mtu. Mkubwa ni rafiki, mdogo ni rafiki, majirani, tuishi naye vizuri nyumbani. Alikuwa hana shida yoyote.
Sasa mika analia, amba nyamaza, atakuja huyo. Alivyoenda mara ya kwanza, alienda akafanya kazi, na mimi pia nikashukuru, nikaona mahitaji ya ile kazi anafanya, akawa nisaidia kama mzazi, nikafaidika mpaka alikuwa sina maskani maalumu, lakini nikapata pa kulala.
Kilichompata kama dadangu Amina, hiyo raundi ya pili alivyoenda kule huko Saudia, alifika kule akafanya kazi kama kiasi cha miezi 4 hivi. Sasa yule tajiri pia akampiga. Alivyompiga huyu dadangu Amina, ndio ikawa ni chanzo chake cha kupata yale maradhi. Kilichotokea baadaye, vile alivyompiga, akawa yule dada Amina hajiwezi, akawa mkono wake haufanyi kazi, mwili wake haufanyi kazi. Yule tajiri alimchukua akampeleka hospitalini. Sio ati kumpeleka kwenda kumshughulikia, alimpeleka tu kwenda kumweka kama kwenda kumtupa huko hospitali.
Alivyosafiri Amina, sasa mimi nilikaa mama Amina. Nikakaa. Sipati mawasiliano yoyote. Kila tukipiga simu hatupati. Tukipiga simu hatuwasiliane naye. Kila tukipiga simu, natumai hata ilivyofika miezi 6 ndio nikapata kauli ya Amina. Na wala si yeye, mtu mwingine. Niambia Amina yuko hospitali. Sasa sote tukashtuka, yuko hospitali, bado hatujapata jibu. Kwani yukoje? Nasema Amina yuko vibaya sana.
Sasa huko hospitali ndo akitupigia simu, alikuwa akiomba namba ya Nancy, huko akitupigia simu akisema mimi huko naumwa, niko mgonjwa na sina kazi saa hizi na sishughulikiwi. Ushaona, ni sindano tu na dawa peke yake na hazinifai, ule ugonjwa unazidi kuendelea.
Hatukuona lolote lile la usaidizi, tuliketi tu kungojea. Mimi nakawa nalia, kula sili, nimebakia hivi kama kigongo. Amina alivyorudi, alivyoletwa nikijua kweli, akatolewa kwenye gari, akaikwa kile kigari kile cha kusukuma mpaka hapa nyumbani, tukampokea. Basi tulipokea na machozi, ndugu wote walilia, tangu wanawake mpaka waume, ndugu wote walilia, manake hali yake ilikuwa si nzuri.
Vile tulivyomwona tulikuwa na huzuni sana, mwingi sana. Pia hatukutarajia kama twaweza tukampata. Sisi pia alikuwa twahisi hatutampata tena, hiyo ndio mwisho wake, wala hatutamuona.
Sometimes in 2017, through an organization that is a human rights organization based in Mombasa that does a lot of work on trafficking, came to inform us of a victim of trafficking who had just returned from Saudi Arabia after being in hospital for 2.5 years without the knowledge of the family, and all efforts that had been put into place to bring her back were not futile. So eventually they managed through this human rights organization and other Kenyans based in Saudi Arabia to bring her back. So when we got this information, we scheduled client consultation, because at the time, and it is still the case, that human trafficking is one areas of interest as a violence against women, the way it manifests itself as a form of violence against women, and within the Kelin's work. Amina's story fall within the parameters of trafficking, that is human trafficking. So we have a law in Kenya, the Counter Trafficking and Terrorism Act, that prohibits any form of human trafficking, and it defines who a victim of trafficking is. So after we applied that criteria of the definition in the law, she ticked all the boxes of who a victim was, and therefore we decided to work with her and develop a case and take the case to court so that we could hold the government of Kenya accountable for the failure to identify Amina as a victim of trafficking. Number two, for the failure of the Kenyan government to provide her with the necessary assistance while in Saudi Arabia and upon a return to Kenya as per the law.
Human trafficking, the right to health and litigation is well connected within our strategic plan, because our strategic plan envisions that we need to realize the right to health for all Kenyans and all people within the Republic of Kenya. And to do so, we take a number of strategies, including strategic litigation, that tries to see how do you establish certain principles, get them enforced by the court, get the court to pronounce them, and eventually, if you're successful in getting the pronouncements, how then do you get those pronouncements to be actually implemented by Parliament, by the executive, by the local governments, through the county governments, but also people within that particular sector, be they be non-state actors like civil society players or people within the private sector. So we see strategic litigation as a tool that can help us explore further, developing the concept of the right to health for people. What does that mean for people who have been subjected to human trafficking? What does it mean to be protected from violence? What does it mean to enjoy your right to physical and mental health in the highest attainable state? So that's what we are hoping to do with some of this litigation, not only to hold the states that are involved and the people who are involved accountable, but to also see what more can we get in terms of the courts pronouncing themselves on what rights do people who have faced human trafficking have that they can hold the state accountable to provide for them.
Within this context, the work that we seek to do with our strategic litigation is to create jurisprudence that articulates exactly what the state obligations are when it comes to a situation of human trafficking. The violation has occurred, there's a victim, and the states have got obligations. What the trouble is historically has been, much as states have been acceding to the treaties and conventions, the implementation on the ground has been lacking. Oftentimes, it may not necessarily be as a result of not wanting to, but it could also be as a result of not being clear about what exactly is required of the state. By advancing the cases that we seek to bring in the space to articulate the rights and obligations of states under human trafficking, we want to be able to create jurisprudence that guides our African states, our African governments, on what exactly their obligations are to victims of trafficking, that provides clarity for organizations that are working with survivors of trafficking on what exactly these victims are entitled to demand from their governments.
HAART came to learn of Amina's case through our partnership with Kelin, and they contacted us because we provide support to victims, and Amina needed support. How we work as an organization is that when we have victims, we carry out a needs assessment. Okay, first we identify victims, there's a tool, and there are questions, and there's a whole assessment that happens. And then based on that, we're able to identify, are you a victim of trafficking, or are you a victim of just poor labor practices, or are you a victim of sexual assault but no trafficking, that kind of thing, to differentiate all the various violations that could happen. So once you're identified as a victim, then now we carry out basic mental health assessment, and also physical and economic assessment. So we would have a conversation with victims about, what do you need in your life? What do you think you need? One, to recuperate and recover. Two, to also be reintegrated either into your community, or if your community was part of the push factors that led to you being trafficked, any other community, just to settle somewhere and build a life for yourself and move on from this horrible experience. So we have psychosocial support, we have medical support, we have economic empowerment and legal support.
Having worked on Amina's case, developing it to a point that we were almost ready to go to court, and then we realized the last minute that it would be a tall order for us to take on the Kenyan government because of the nature of the gaps that we had. I would say that a perfect case, all you need are good facts and evidence. So you cannot have good evidence and bad facts. You must have facts and evidence that support those facts.
In terms of, one, there was recruitment, there was harboring, there was transfer of the victim from one place to another. That's the act. Two, there was a means by which this action was taken, which means there was either coercion, fraud, abuse of power over the victim. That's the means by which the victim was moved from one place to another. And thirdly, there has to be exploitation of the victim. So exploitation can be for various forms. It's not a closed list under the Palermo Protocol. And this includes exploitation for purposes of labor, as well as sexual exploitation.
So in this case, Kenya would have had an obligation to ensure that Amina acquires the necessary travel documents. Okay, they did that. They gave her a temporary document, and then it would have also had an obligation to get her an air ticket to facilitate a travel back home. That would not have been the obligation of her friends in Saudi Arabia or her family back in Kenya. It ought to have been the obligation of the Kenyan government through its diplomatic mission abroad. Finally, when she gets to travel and she arrives in the origin state, the origin state, and in this case Kenya, had an obligation to identify her as a victim of trafficking and provide the measures and reliefs and redress that has been provided for under the law. Some of this would include provision of shelter in the event that she didn't have anywhere to go or anywhere to stay, provision of necessary medical assistance. So the Kenyan government had an obligation to ensure that she's treated and she has high quality health care at any stage to enable her heal and be able to be reintegrated back to the society. And most important obligation is to punish the perpetrators or people who got her into the trafficking from the destination state. So they have an obligation to investigate, and whoever the investigator finds that is responsible, they have an obligation to charge them in a court of law, and they have an obligation to ensure that they have been convicted for the offense or the crime that they have done. In other instances, they would have an obligation to pay damages if a civil case or a civil claim would be instituted against the traffickers themselves.
So it is our hope that those who watch this documentary would be able to take the necessary action, and particularly those who may want to support people who've been subjected to human trafficking, be it providing a lawyer, be it providing psychosocial support, be it providing for their socio-economic needs. We hope that by hearing Amina's case, by hearing the challenges of those who worked on the case and what made it difficult for them to succeed or not to succeed, people will be able to take these lessons and to be able to apply them for those who are actually taking forward such cases, to see how can that work, how can that be relevant in terms of helping us to be able to get successful litigation in the circumstances.